Today's special socially democratic episode from the 2023 ALP Fringe is presented to you by Dunn. Dunn is a progressive campaign agency that specialises in campaigning and community organising. We work with non-profit and community-based organisations, trade unions, progressive businesses and social democratic parties across the globe. Dunn develops community engagement and organising strategies to win campaigns both big and small, and we train engagement staff, volunteers and organisers in leadership and power building. And if you want to create change in your community in 2023, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. Today's episode is also brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. When you need support with a legal issue, it can feel super daunting. And that's why for over 100 years, Maurice Blackburn has been helping guide clients with their legal needs. They're here to help you when you need them most, from workplace to medical injuries, class actions, occupational diseases, and wills and estates planning. As Australia's leading plaintiff law firm, they have the local knowledge and the national network with experience that you can count on. To find out more, simply go to mauriceblackburn.com.au. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust, lists that are up to date, phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energise the community both online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners, and to find out more, just go to their website, which is swiftfoxcrm.com, to win your next campaign. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast, out every Friday, that dives into the progressive campaigns of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And on today's episode, our special episode that we recorded during the ALP National Conference Fringe program, we're going to be joined by three incredibly talented professional campaigners. We're going to be joined by Eloise Young, who is from Love Reacts Only, which is a digital and social media consultancy, but she's also the former digital director for Victorian Premier Dan Andrews. We're going to be joined by the current campaign director and State Secretary of Queensland Labor, Kate Flanders, and the national training organiser for the ALP National Secretariat, Nadia Montague. And our conversation today is on modern campaigns. So we're going to be talking to Eloise, Kate and Nadia, and they're going to bring their extensive campaign experience and knowledge that covers organising, social and traditional media, research, messaging and training and development, and digital organising, to discuss political campaigning and reflect on how the last couple of successful election campaigns for Labor have been so instrumental in maintaining the Labor Party as being the number one campaign machine in this country, but also start to think about how do we continue to grow in this space. I really enjoyed today's the conversation that we had with our three guests on this episode, and I hope you do too. When you're done listening to the show, don't forget to subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts when you're done listening. And for all the updates, don't forget to follow Dunn Street on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Okay, let's get to today's episode. We are taping this one on a Friday afternoon on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people. And before we kick off this episode, I just want to acknowledge that we are meeting on these traditional lands, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and also reaffirm that this was and always will be Aboriginal land. Can I also welcome our wonderful audience that has joined us for our second episode as part of the 2023 ALP National Conference here in Brisbane, and part of the Fringe program. So you should give yourselves all a round of applause. And for our audience listening at home, I just want to go on the record and say there's at least 6,000 people in the room today. Exactly. Today's episode is a discussion about political campaigning, and off the back of a series of incredibly successful elections for the Labor Party at the state and federal level, we're actually going to take a bit of a break. We have a bit of a breather. We don't have an election for quite some time. In fact, the next election we have is only 435 days away, and I'm looking at the party secretary here in Queensland because you're up next, Kate. But whilst we had this moment where we have a break from elections, I thought that this was an opportune time for us to have a bit of a conversation about what we've done well in the past, what are our key learnings from most recent campaigns, and what do we need to do into the future to improve the way that we run campaigns and win elections, which is very close to my heart. Can I introduce our guests for today's podcast, starting with the Campaign Director and State Secretary of Queensland Labor, and prior to taking up her current role, she was the Assistant Secretary for the Together Union. Kate Flanders, welcome to Social Democratic.
Hello, thank you.
Our second guest is the founder of Love Reacts Only, which is a digital and social media consultancy, and she was a former digital director for the Victorian Premier, Dan Andrews. Please welcome Eloise Young. And making up our collective of campaign aficionados is the National Training Organiser for the ALP National Secretariat and the former lead organiser for the campaigns team at the Victorian Trades Hall Council. Please welcome Nadia. All right, so what we're going to do here, we're going to break up this conversation into sort of subcategories or subtopics, and I want to start with campaign communication and sort of campaign messaging and narrative. And I want to start with Kate and ask you, because you know, as a campaign director, you are responsible for the narrative of a campaign, no small thing. And I want to get a sense from you, what are the key ingredients that make a good, effective campaign message or campaign narrative?
That's a great question, and thank you, Stephen. I would clarify one thing. The Northern Territory is just before us next year. So, you know, we do have, but we are very good comrades. Queensland NT, it's very good. So I think the good thing about a good message or a good narrative is that obviously something that connects with people. At the moment, we have very short attention span often for a good message. So A Better Future, our federal election message last year, allowed us to scaffold a lot of messages under that. Obviously, Daniel Andrews' campaign in Victoria, obviously Doing What Matters, was a really good opportunity to then say, we're doing this about level crossings, or we're doing this about health. Or so I think when we've got a campaign narrative and you're thinking about different things like voter coalitions or who people are, then, you know, it's about thinking about, well, what message do we need to get to this group of people to make sure that they do want to keep voting for us, or how do we attract their attention in their very busy lives to make sure that it cuts through. And we're getting a shorter and shorter attention window, so that's why I think some of those short three-word kind of headline messages are helpful, but then we need to also find ways to reach people when they are paying attention. And so I think often campaigns I've worked on, you talk about, do you want to set up a choice between you and the opposition? Are you setting up, you know, a referendum on an incumbent government to try and get rid of them, to say this is all the things they've done wrong, a bit of what we did with Morrison, but how do you do that? And then the other exciting thing for us at the moment, I think, is message segmentation and how we reach people. So as you said in the intro, I used to work in a public sector union, so a lot of what we would do was be talking directly to public sector workers about the issues that mattered to them, which might not matter to other people in the community in the same way, but it was very effective to be able to say, you know, this campaign in a particular state election we would call Fight for Jobs, because it was about our jobs and our members' lives, and so that was what impacted and resonated with them. So I think there's a lot of things that go into an effective message and narrative. Something I know our Premier here in Queensland, you know, by the end of the 2020 campaign, it was kind of like, we are safe because she is strong, was like a very good resonating message. That wasn't maybe technically the start of the campaign narrative, but really people just resonated with that about Anastasia, and really, you know, we had that big moment where a lot of people who didn't usually vote Labor said, actually, this is a leader that we believe in, and we understand that we had a lovely life here in Queensland during that time because she was so determined to keep us safe.
Eloise, if I can turn to you and want to sort of lean into your experience in the online space, getting the message tone right is so important, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the tone in a traditional media sense needs to be different to the tone that you have in an online space. Can you want to talk a bit about getting that tone right?
Yeah, and I think you can almost break that down a bit further. So following on from what Kate said, you've sort of got, I guess, when you're thinking about an individual leader, whether that's the party leader, the premier, a candidate. You have your identity, which is effectively how people get to know you, and that needs to be, again, simple and easy to understand so that you connect with people. We're all diverse. We all have rich and diverse internal monologues, but online you really need to make it very, very simple so that the leader, so that in 2 sentences people know who this person is, and that's what we always try to do with Daniel. The man is an absolute golf nut, but you will not see any mention of golf on his social media because, that is not the sense of self that he's capturing. And then you have your voice, which is like the way that you speak. For Dan, again, it's very sort of to the point, direct, bit funny. He's got a bit of sass, and then the tone is really in every moment that you're communicating with people. How are you meeting them where they are, and how are you able to encapsulate that feeling that you want them to have about that thing? So I think you have to do all of those 3 things well. And I think online, just going back to what Kate said, in a campaign, you might only have contact with people a couple of times, but online you can actually be part of their daily life. So if you do the work, which I think all the Labor premiers have done, you do the work to build that relationship, build that connection with people. So it's not just at campaign time, you're like, oh, please vote for us. It's like that, they know you. They know Anastasia, they know Dan, they know that you can get more of a sense of someone online than you can just watching them on the 6 o'clock news, because people can see into their daily life, they can see what they stand for. And I think that's if you do the work on it, it's a very worthwhile exercise. As you can see with the way that the Labor premiers around the country and the Prime Minister have managed to capture people's hearts, I think, through digital.
Eloise, you mentioned an interesting thing there. You said you've built a relationship with them, they've got to know you, they know who you are. So I want to ask you, Nadia, because obviously one of your areas of strength as an organiser is actually in public narrative.
Yeah.
And I am interested in your thoughts on how well do our candidates and our lead politicians, our premiers or leaders, how well do they nail their public narrative? And maybe you want to sort of unpack what public narrative is a little bit for our
I'm so
audience
glad
as
you
well.
asked this. I was like, please ask me this question, because I got the same thing from what you said as well, Eloise. So public narrative, for folks who haven't heard of it before, which is very normal and understandable, is a kind of craft of, we understand that people, when they make political decisions, it's a concert between the head, which is like interest, it's about the facts, it's about how it's going to affect me. But really we know a lot of the time that people make choices about the heart. So if we only speak to folks about the head, then it's not going to get through. And one of the ways that we teach candidates and political organisers and volunteers and people who care about changing the world for the better is to talk about basically 3 interlinking stories. So I'm just going to really quickly kind of cover it. So the first is a story of self, like what brings you to this leadership? And I don't mean like leadership of a party, I mean being a member of a political party is kind of unusual, right? Like we are a cool room of people, but we're a little bit unusual. Like not a ton of people are members of a political party, not a ton of people throw on different clothes after they finish a shift at the hospital. Like what brings you to that? Like why do you do this work? And that says like why you're called, why you're here. And then the second, that's a story of self. And then a story of us is why are we doing this together? What combines us together? We are all very different people, but what links us? What makes us an us? What have we experienced together? What do we believe in? And then a story of now, which I think most folks really know how to talk about this all the time, which is why is this urgent? Also, why is it possible? Why is there hope? And a story of now is something that when we sort of thread all of those things through, you are ready to do the next ask. Like you are ready to do it, you're ready to sign up. And so I think it's, so Stephen, we both did the Harvard Kennedy School executive education thing where we sort of signed up to be a teaching fellow to like teach folks around the world. And we were like, oh yeah, cool, that'll be really chill. It was at like 3 a.m. in the morning. It was a wonderful experience. But I think there's more things that candidates can embrace about public narrative, because there's incredible things that we learn when we talk about our stories, about challenges we have, we learn and challenge. And the choices we make, which tells us like what we value and what the outcome is. And that means that we sort of situate like a challenge, but we also really situate hope, and not a kind of categorical hope or a categorical inspiration. It's an experience. It's something that we share. There's a vulnerability. And you learn from people in vulnerability very quickly. I think there's a lot of public narrative in that candidates use, and they often use a real structure-based approach, which makes so much sense because being a candidate is it's a highly vulnerable thing, and being vulnerable is really hard. But people really connect with people when they have vulnerability. When you share something about yourself that's a little bit difficult, of why you've learned about your values, why, like how you've acted on them, or perhaps not acted on them, and how that made you feel, and why are you showing up today, and then what we should all have hope in. I think one of my favourite sort of public narratives in the last few years was Auntie Norma Ingram was a candidate in Newtown and just had a beautiful, beautiful story that had these moments when I listened to her tell that story, I felt like I was in the room in those moments. Like she was talking about it as it was happening now instead of something that happened to her. So it's really powerful and a bit scary, and I think we can do it better, and that's really exciting because it's a hell of a tool.
I want to move into organising, but I kind of want to talk a bit about the relationship between traditional organising and online organising, and how those two interrelate and depend on one another. But I want to give an example of a terrible example. This is the 2013 federal campaign, back in the days when we lost elections. And someone in part of the national campaign had a database of over 10,000 potential supporters in Victoria that wanted to get involved in the campaign, and I was the field director, and they didn't give us the list. Your face was, yeah, my face. And because they didn't trust us about what we were going to do with the list. I was like, dude, we're going to call them up and recruit them into the frigging campaign. Like, just give them the frigging list. You know, we're desperate for volunteers. Sticking with you, Nadia, how are we going in that? And it's got better than since 2013, obviously. But where are we at now? Where are you seeing good experiences of that interrelationship between the online and the offline organising?
First of all, that is a heartbreaking story. I really feel that, like a physical reaction. And also imagine being a volunteer waiting for that call and never getting that call. It's really, really unfair. I think asking people to do things is really important. I feel like there was a period in like the early 2010s where everyone was obsessed with just doing online stuff. It was just like, sign this petition, step 1, sign this petition, step 2, through science or magic, step 3, profit. Like it's had this sort of like theory of change, like do something online and then everything will change. Then people kind of wised up and were like, no, that's not going to happen. Let's forget online and only do sort of field activities that are sort of quite transactional and short-lived. I think we're understanding sort of relationships better, but if we really understand relationships, we know we need, and relationships and organising is we go to where people are. Like that's like a really core thing. And so it's a busier time than ever, and there's a lot of people who they are finding their own communities online. So we should be there, not in this kind of astroturf way, but in a way that we are real people, that we are engaging with groups online, we are engaging with people with shared experiences that we have online, and we are having those conversations and we're building those relationships. I think that time of like digital organising over here, field organising over here, I think that's really gone. Like, and that is now sort of, it is all about relationships and how we can build it. And there's exceptional stuff that, particularly sort of in the States, they're doing where sort of it's, again, they're not just digital volunteers, they're field volunteers that also end up going online and having conversations and responding, and you know, and I think Eloise, you and I were speaking about this like the other day, which was like how people almost like, you think that people will be very difficult online, but they start having real self-facilitated conversations that get deep. And that's like what we want, like those conversations, just wherever they are.
Eloise, do you want to share some of the experiences that you had in recent campaigns on what Nadia's talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I would say part of it is resourcing, part of it is about, but you know, on a campaign, you will get a flood of inbound comments and messages, and a lot of the time, you know, you just don't have the capacity to field them. But when I was working in South Australia last year, we just made a decision that we were going to respond to every single comment, because we were fighting a really hard game, because you know the government had a much bigger budget and a much bigger team and a much bigger reach online. So we were like, we had to do everything. We literally have to do everything we possibly can. So we just started responding to everybody. Even people that we thought this person is actually being snarky and it's not a question, we just responded to it as though it was a genuine question. And I was actually surprised, like very surprised at the response that we got. People were like, oh, thanks for the information. Yeah, cool, got my vote. And we're like, oh, wow, okay. Should we have been doing this the whole time? But I think there can be a bit of a silo between, so digital, you know, the KPI for digital is to get your stuff out, get your message out, and the organisers are like, we're going to go and knock on the doors. But actually, you know, people nowadays live online, and having a conversation face-to-face or having a conversation over message is equally powerful for people. We don't see a differentiation between it. If someone's actually, and people would say, oh, thanks so much for answering my question. You know, there was a real sense of, and like I said, I was surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been, I don't know, but I was like, wow, okay, I think we need to invest in this. Like, we really need to put more into actually, this is having the candidate or the leader or whoever respond back and give information and answer questions and people feel heard is actually just as powerful as having a face-to-face conversation or one on the phone. And I think we should elevate them to strategically the same level.
Eloise, you just mentioned the word silo, and I'll ask you, Kate, as the campaign director, you're in charge of multiple, what do we call them, departments of a campaign, right?
Yeah.
And then even between the departments, there's also sort of, we can see silos being created between CHQ and then the folks out on the ground. I remember the 2008 Obama campaign, there was that expression, fuck Chicago. Because even though we think about the Obama campaign as being amazing, like there was this rivalry between folks on the ground and the CHQ in Chicago, and it was just kind of like, oh, fuck Chicago, when things would come down. So you really try, how do we avoid that? How do we start to, you know, remove these silos and make sure that we're all on the same page and moving in the same direction? Not easy, right?
No, and I haven't run the state campaign from head office, so I've been one of those people being like, oh, head office, you know. So, but also most of my state campaign experience in Queensland has been running like a third-party campaign in support of the Labor Party. So I've done that. But I think effectively with all of the state secretaries I've worked with in that role, we've always had a good information sharing relationship where I was like, we're doing this. This is our target segment. This is how we're doing it. And so the layering worked. And I think it is just about having that good campaign team communication, but also if you have that good vision as a team about what we're all trying to achieve, and then empowering people in their own processes, but with good ground rules, because obviously we all know as well you can lose campaign days on accidents or deliberate mistakes that are about, I've decided to go away from the $1 million message you have spent testing to do this because I thought this was a good idea. And you're like, no. But I think the other thing is that Queensland is an incredibly diverse state. So we have a lot of need for variations and difference. We have some really tough Labor Greens contests here in the southeast, in other places where our biggest opponents are the Katter Party or One Nation, and then obviously the LNP, who are themselves a diverse crew. So we have to kind of have different approaches in those areas. But I think good team communication, having good leaders in those areas, people you know who are well briefed early, and then going out there and empowering their people. Because the other thing that I love about the Labor Party and the Labor movement here, where I've spent more than 20 years working, is that there are so many clever people, so many clever folks. Nadia started here,
It's like my first boss.
Exactly. Nadia worked for me a very long time ago. So it's like all these clever, and the clever young people as well. Like, I am in no way like Eloise and Nadia good at digital things. So, and I'm like, please enlighten me.
Same.
And so those things, if you give people the space to organically do what works in their community, but have briefed them well on the local message or the central message, and they can localise it, it's really good.
So you made an interesting point there, in that, talking about the capacity of our people and developing them. Nadia, you have just recently taken on this new role at the National Secretariat as the training director. And I want to sort of just reflect on how far the party's come in that time, because training's been an area, I think, and I say this as a former party official, where we've been a bit found wanting on that. and I think back to, I don't mean to share these horror stories, but I will. In 2010, I was working on a local campaign, and some poor young Labor kid came in to make some calls, and the training was, there's the script, off you go, and I'll be back in 2 hours. And I sat and listened to this guy make these terrible calls, and it was a terrible experience for him as a volunteer, and I'm sure it was a terrible experience for the voter getting the calls as well. We're not there anymore, thank God. But we need to continue to develop our people, right? So no pressure, Nadia. How are you going to do it?
She's already doing it. You're doing great.
So, I mean, it's kind of the coolest job ever. I feel like I'm in training, but I feel like to be a trainer, you need to be an organiser. To be a digital person, you need to be an organiser. You have to sort of be across all of these things. But it's really exciting to think about, let's really deliberately think about how to build not just a strong collective, not just a strong, smart collective that feel confident and motivated to do what we need to do, which is to keep what we've built, keep on pushing, keep on winning, but also there is more of the world to win, and that is something we're all doing together. So to think about what are the pathways and the hallways that we can create to walk through to do that incredible liberation work, that incredible work that we can do together. And so just thinking through this stuff was really great. And I can recognise some folks who were here before when I was talking about some of the programs. But we have launched the National Labor Campaign Fellowship, and which is a raft of different programs that really address lots of different places, lots of different skills. We've got a digital boot camp coming up. We have a leadership program for people who we want to sort of feel empowered to step into more leadership in the party, to reflect the country that we represent more fairly. So we've got a boot camp coming up next year. I just finished training, was it 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
3 weeks ago in Queensland, the Queensland Fellows for the National Campaign Fellowship. And so at the end of the year, we'll have 80 folks who have stepped up to do intense training on how to not just win campaigns in a way like it's on your own, but in a way that it is collective and together, and we keep building and keep learning together, and it's really, really exciting. I'm really, really pumped to do it.
Back to you, Kate. Out of cycle campaigning. And do you want to mean by that, out of cycle? So when we're not near an election, right? I think people call it continuous campaigning.
Indeed.
For some reason, I hate that term, but anyway. We've struggled with this over the years. And to be clear, I think most parties grapple with this anyway, so I don't think it's something that's unique to us here in Australia for Labor. But, trying to both organise and then mobilise our supporter base to take action on things that are important to them out of an election when it doesn't have that urgency of opportunity, or is it need? I can't remember. Is being a struggle. Where are we going wrong, do you think? Is it that we're just our expectations are too high of what we want our people to do, or are we just really shit at it?
I think I'm a bit more optimistic than that. So we've been just trying to try things here in the Queensland branch. And so we did, straight after the federal election last year, we were devastated that we'd lost Griffith. But we went straight back out pretty much with, we made coreflutes about the emissions reduction targets, and we went out because the Greens were talking about blocking it in the Senate, and we went out and we door-knocked with those. We did confuse many voters in Griffith who, when we were out with our street stalls and stuff, they're like, is there another election? And we're like, no, we're just here to talk about what ALP's going to deliver. And then they were really impressed. And I think, we went straight back out, and so we've been trying to do a few different things around continuous campaigning, and I think it's that just finding those moments or those issues that crop up. And the most recent issue for us, and we went out a little bit earlier, went a little bit rogue, classic Queensland vibes, earlier in the year about housing, because we said, Max Chandler-Mather is the housing spokesperson for the Greens. We know that this is going to be an issue for us, and so we went out to our, tried a little bit of good email campaigning to start with. So emailed a 60,000 person list just about housing and the Housing Australia Future Fund, and I psychotically responded to most of the people responding myself, which was great. I enjoyed that a lot. But like Eloise's experience, got a lot of good dialogue back and forth, so that was really good. But we've been out there talking about that issue because it's really important to our rank and file. So I think there are these moments. Another thing that we had a really good success on last year was in Queensland, the Premier announced our Energy and Jobs Plan, which is incredibly motivating for our volunteers because it's something that party members in Queensland have been working on for so long, you know, and going out there and saying, this is a true Labor project where you can say this is renewable energy and it's good for workers. And so we've had some great local, like basically based around our state members, but even in our unheld seats, getting out there with Labor Party members who are like, I want to talk about this. And I want to talk about it at the bus station, I want to talk about it on the doors, and I also want to talk about it on my social media. And it's been fun.
Let's take a quick break to talk about SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust. Lists that are up to date, absolutely. Phone banks that can change minds. Emails that drive donations and events that will energise the community online and offline. And text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. And to find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign. Okay, let's get back to the show. Some of the things that Kate's talking about there is building urgency and around things that are important to people. How does the online world help us learn and understand that in a far more effective way? Because one thing I do want to talk, sort of get a sense from you guys today is that moving our campaigns away from that sort of traditional gut feel campaign to more evidence-based campaigning. And I think that the online space is good for us in terms of identifying those kind of issues and working out, you know, where do we go. Talk to us a bit about your experience in identifying that. What are you learning from the work that you're doing, both when you worked in government, but even now?
In terms of metrics and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess that's where digital comes into its own because you get, you know, instantaneous feedback about, it's not just, you might have a gut feel about something and then you put it out and then you either, you know, affirmed or not. And then you can keep refining that message, so you can keep going with that, with whatever the topic it is, and just keep. You know, there's no limit to the number of times that you can talk about something online. You know, a pack of journalists will only turn up once to an announcement, but online you can just keep re-messaging it, and you're only limited by your imagination as to how many times you can talk about something that is, you know, only the number of angles that you have. But yeah, I think that's where you can get really granular. I think there's heaps of potential.
Nadia, just like tattoos and tight jeans, third-party campaigns were very popular in the last decade.
Yeah.
And I want to get an idea from you, because obviously when you worked for Trades Hall, you guys ran a very effective, what I guess we'd call a third-party campaign. Where's that going? Because one of the things I am noticing is that, particularly in certain battleground seats, there is a lot of third parties on the ground, plus the efforts that we're doing, and that. How do we coordinate that better to make sure that we're all singing from the same songbook?
Working at working at Trades Hall, I was often side by side with a lot of different comrades, Labor comrades from other unions, often lugging around a 6 metre tall lobster called which we would chase around Matthew Guy with, But the third-party campaigning thing, and I guess maybe sort of, I might just call it issues, like specific constituency issues campaigning. It's a really important part, because there are some people for whom will walk past me in a red shirt every time. But if I am wearing a union shirt, or I am wearing a shirt about it's sort of identifying with my self-interest, my values, there are some people who are going to have more of a conversation with me. And so I was able to talk people around about their own self-interest and values around those issues. But it's also kind of tricky and all over the shop a bit to coordinate that stuff. And I think particularly in campaigns we are, tired. We are getting up early, we are staying up late. And everyone's kind of on edge, so it's sometimes like really unpredictable when there's a new player and we don't know what's happening and who are they speaking to. I reckon one of the best things is I could talk about coordination, but I really think we shouldn't just talk about relationships in the context of a campaign that we are running and the people for whom we are speaking. We should also have relationships and a sit down and a few cups of tea. We should know these people already in our progressive movement and across sort of, be it unions, be it allies and other folks. We should have set aside a lot of our organising time to have cups of tea, to have, one-on-ones, to see what are their interests, what are our interests, how can we sort of apply complementary resources to each, because it's going to take a village to take down a lot of the threats and dangers that are coming around the corner. People who want to dismantle the things that we've created. So yes, I reckon there's I think there's also some good Excel spreadsheets as well. But I think it really is about those relationships and making sure that you know your comrades. And so if you do something really annoying, they're like, that's okay. She gets this one because I've had a relationship with her. She bought me a cup of tea.
Eloise, can you add to that any sort of ongoing third-party accounts in the online space or content creation that you want to lift up?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Union TikTok. I think they're doing an absolutely excellent job, Gen United especially, I think. And I think that's sort of the model that we might be moving towards because there's so much proliferation of content creation. It only needs the loosest sort of, I think anyway, the loosest sort of shuffling together. Because if you think about, and your comrade Matt that was on the pod, if you had 20 content creators or 50 or 100 or whatever the model is, all creating stuff that is on message, or at least loosely on message, and they're engaging people every day and they're building essentially, their own individual followings, but it's along the same general line, then it's only a very small step at election time to be like, all those things that person's been talking about for 3 years that you really, really agree with, well, that's how you get them. I think, because it's harder and harder to build followings, I think, as an organisation, and it's easier and easier to do it as individuals, especially on platforms like TikTok. And so that could potentially be a winning model going forward, where you sort of let people loose, you pay them. I know that people may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the union models is that they're effectively contracting out to young people. They're not employed by the union, but they're paid per video. And so there's a model there where you basically have this kind of stable of people that are all producing stuff, fun, creative, exciting, talking about the issues that people care about. It doesn't have to be all under the brand of a party or a union or whatever, because the main thing is that people are buying the message that you're selling. It doesn't really matter who the carrier is, and then it's at the end that you can scoop them up.
I'm going to go off the cuff a bit here. What's a bad example of, and you don't have to name names here, but if you want to, you can, of bad content you want to avoid? And you and I have talked about this on the podcast before, but I just want to get a sense of what are you looking at now going, can we just stop doing that?
I don't know. I guess the thing is, it's difficult because to make content good, you have to take risks. You have to push the boundaries, and there's going to be times where you get a clanger. That's just unavoidable. But I suppose it's about taking measured risks in a space where you can see that, you have a receptive audience, or you sense check it with enough people. But then, there is some cringe stuff happening out there, let's be honest. I won't name names.
Okay, fair enough. Nadia, do you want to jump on that?
Yeah, I think I reckon I've seen content where people are like, hi, I'm just an ordinary person, definitely not a paid influence, and you can clock it, it's not sort of, it's a bit of an astroturfy vibe. Instead of, I think sometimes we want to play 4D chess with some stuff, and it's like we're tempted or think we can't talk about this particular issue and my experience with it. And some of the best things you could do would be to jump online, if you care about an issue, jump onto your neighbourhood group and be like, hey, I am a local Labor Party member, really proud unionist, proud for these reasons, this is what's happening. This local chemist, last 6 months ago, I paid this much for my pharmacy, for my script, now it costs this, I'm stoked. And then someone will be like, I hate Labor, and they'll be like, I don't. And someone else will jump on it. So I think just being authentic and telling and owning those stories is really important. And the good stuff that has been happening on TikTok and been developing sort of in anticipation of the US election is is folks not talking, like owning that they are political, but talking about it in this personal way. So instead of being like, I'm here to tell this message, it's people are going to sort of switch on more to a political message that's actually, you don't clock as being political, it's like that personal is political. You know, that political is personal, and you really feel like this person is telling you a story, rather than it kind of being this like the equivalent of walking into a random room and being like, this policy's amazing, and then closing the door in this really awkward way, and people are like, wow, who was that? But instead, you know, just be proud, like you believe this stuff, you really believe in it, you know, we care and we want to see this world change, like own it, get out there, like try and actually tell that story online.
Eloise?
Oh, and yeah, sorry, just to follow on to that point, I think that is the key underlying thing of what makes, when something lands well, it's because it is authentic. Yeah. But I do think that, you know, not everyone, it's hard to talk into a phone, it's hard to make a selfie video, like that is actually a skill to be learned, and I don't think that we should push people into it for whom that is uncomfortable, because I think then we do risk making people look inauthentic and uncomfortable, and that's where you get those clangers. But I think that, you know, where people can do that and do it well, I think it is really powerful. Like, for example, in Victoria, like Georgie Purcell for Animal Justice, like that is a you know, a class in personal branding because she's comfortable and she shares part of her personal story. But that's not for everyone. So I think it's about finding a space where people are comfortable and where it feels natural to them. And if that's not doing selfie videos, then it's not doing selfie videos. Like, you just find another way to communicate.
Kate, Eloise just said before about taking risks, and my observation of the online content that's coming out of Victoria with Daniel Andrews' social media, they do take risks. And I find that interesting. Particularly, I've got a lot of former friends that worked in the previous Labor governments, Braxton, Brumby, and they look at the stuff that Daniel does today, and they're like, there is no way in hell that we would have done that back in the 2000s. And I feel that certainly in Victoria, there has been a shift in taking risks. And I'm interested to get your thoughts on that as a campaign director. Do you want to run a campaign in which you can be a bit brave every now and then and take risks, or do you want to run a campaign where it's still very much, no, this is the strategy, this is how we're going to execute it? Like, I mean,
I think everyone, like, I think we all look at Daniel's social media and think that's fantastic, and obviously there are a lot of fantastic people working on it with him as well. But I also think it's authentic to him and to his government, and so I think that's right. But also, like, a lovely tone, you know, that Eloise talked about developing earlier as well. And I think I, as a campaigner, have always liked taking risks because I think that is where you can get your big reward, and I think it's
risky.
important. I know, it is problematic. But also I was like, oh well. I feel like the Queensland branch knew what they were getting at.
Yeah, just close the door every now and then.
They were like, oh no. Yeah. But it's fun, right? Like, that's what's fun. And we are thinking about third-party campaigns. The hilarious anecdote I have about third-party campaigns, we had the Redcliffe by-election when Campbell Newman was the Premier. I think we had like 29 third-party campaigns who all wanted to have a go, you know, because there's like every voter coalition, you get like bikies, doctors, lawyers, like every trade union separately. You know, we all had the whole thing. It was a nightmare. There were a lot of different how to vote cards, all putting the LNP last. But it was a hectic. 9
people
one.
Knocking your door at the one time.
That's
that
right.
Kind of
there
stuff,
were the polling booths was my favourite thing because I was organising the doctors then, and so we had all these guys in scrubs, which was great, and then the firefighters were all there in their firefighter outfits, and those like everyone else, various stunt things that we had, and it was great. But I think that they're the sorts of things as well where you can say, yes, people are out there telling their genuine story about why they were so angry with these decisions of this government, and it's easy to do that like from an opposition. But I think from a government, and what I love about Anastasia's tone is, as our Premier, is that she is very warm and very friendly, and I think sometimes that is harder to communicate online in a text post or a graphic or something like that. And so it's funny, you get people who are like, oh, I met the Premier, she was so nice. And I'm like, she is very nice, that's right. But she's also the Premier, so it's like it can seem aloof from us going about our ordinary days, because that's a very important job. And for a long time, she was, like Daniel was, doing a daily press conference talking to us about whether or not we were going to die. So that was like a really big deal. Yeah. And so I think that also was a moment for all of them to go through as leaders where, you know, we saw them every day and they became our most important informer of the day. So we built a relationship with them. But then after that, without the daily COVID press conference, you know, we had to wean ourselves off that, but then find a way for them to have those good moments to communicate, but still do their very busy, hard jobs. So I think that is why it is important to have experts like Eloise and other people to support you when you're in that leadership role, to say this is how we can talk about these things online. And
but you guys have clearly done it well then, because I mean, Anastasia's been incredibly successful here in Queensland, right?
Yeah, I can take no credit for that because I haven't run any of her other campaigns. But she is very good at it, and she's very good at. And I do think Queenslanders know the Premier, and they know that she's on their side and that she's fighting really hard for them, but also that she's really good ideas for the future of the state, and that people they believe in that, you know, and they go. I listened to her last night. We were at an event and she was saying, 4 years ago, I was talking about vanadium and everyone thought I was mad. And now everyone's talking about it because it's critical minerals and that's what we need for the renewable energy future. I'm like, I know, this is the thing. Like, she has this great ability to kind of, to pick, this is something that we need to keep Queensland going in the right direction. And that's, oh my God, that was a Peter Beattie heading in the right direction. Horrifying campaign jingles of the past. Not horrifying, obviously, he also won, but that was just all stuck in my brain.
Was that during the time where there was that stunt, speaking of third parties, where it was Springborg?
No, that was the 2009 election that we ran, and we did, that was our third party campaign where we had this guy running for the LNP, Lawrence Springborg, who we sent in our union, basically the young people who work for us made them be a theatre troupe, and they just followed him around with a tug of war and with a bobblehead of him where he was pulling them into unemployment. And he made the fatal error one day of engaging with the troupe, like at a train station with the full pack, like the full media pack. And it was a great...
As in got on the other side.
Yeah, he pulled the workers into unemployment. He backed his bobblehead. He went the wrong way. So it was really a good moment for us. But that was also... Stephen Miles, now the Deputy Premier of Queensland, designed that stunt. And he also did the website that we did, because it was the first time we'd done like a gamification. We had a website where you could play a game about how many public servants got made unemployed by Lawrence. So it was like a whole... Yeah. We did have our moments before 2010.
We've all had our moments before 2010.
I know. Many years later, maybe too tired.
Well, speaking of 2010, I feel like from 2010 to 2018, roughly, we saw this, I've mentioned before about this shift away from sort of that gut feel driven campaign to more of a data driven campaign. And there's a number of factors that contributed to that, but some wonderful people in the data and analytics space started to get their voices heard when we started to devise campaigns. Now, I'm going to put a controversial thought out there, and Kate can tell me to piss off if you like, but I feel like the intellectual curiosity and the support of the work of our data analytics people has been diminished somewhat. And by that I mean, you know, from 2010 to say 2015, there was a number of experiments that the party conducted, testing the effectiveness of different types of campaign treatment. For example, you know, we've now running experiments that showed us that a conversation with a voter is far more effective than a mail piece. That's really handy. You know, mail's expensive. A conversation is for free, right? We worked out that, you know, how long it takes for a persuasion conversation to diminish over time. That makes us work out strategies where, well, let's not start doing persuasion 6 months out because that person's going to reset and forget, right? So there's been a whole, and that's only a couple of things that the party have done. That we haven't done any of those experiments for over 4 or 5 years, some of those bigger things. What do we need to do to start to support that work being brought back into the way that we campaign?
Yeah, I think it's... we have an amazing data and digital organiser at Queensland Labor, and...
we steal your guys a lot, right?
You do, yeah.
In Victoria, I should say, yeah.
Yeah, but we're lucky to have that capacity here, and we work with the National Secretariat team who are also really good, and I think... and we're just embarking on a journey of trying to train some more people up in it, because I think, it is good, but it's also moving really fast and as you say, I also think there was a moment after 2019 when we all did so much field but failed to get over the line, where I was personally really devastated about worrying that people would then devalue field. And it was a really big thing for us because I live in the electorate of Bono. We had a fantastic candidate, Joe Brisky. We door knocked and called, I feel like, the whole place. And we then had these conversations in our rank and file branch meetings afterwards about well, should we just do disinformation online? Is that the only, is that, because we felt like all our effort. But I think it's getting to a point now where we understand you have to have a sophisticated layered campaign. So you have to have the right digital piece. You've got to have, if you've got the opportunity to have volunteers letterboxing and getting something physically in front of some voters that will help. You've got your people out on the stalls. You've got paid advertising. And importantly, you have real people having face-to-face conversations wherever you can. I think the other thing for us that's very interesting after last year's election particularly is we're finding it harder to get people on the phone, particularly younger people. They don't want to pick up a phone call.
Yeah.
But text is obviously better, so that's, it's that kind of thing that we've got to find ways to get right.
Does anyone else want to add to that data question?
I feel like I felt that heartbreak for 2019 as well. I think there are ways that we can do data on a smaller scale to actually test what we do very locally on the ground. A/B test a bunch of things, see what works. Maybe it doesn't go out to everybody, but when I say A/B test, it's sort of get a small group and maybe, for example, your example, Stephen, of mail versus conversation. All right, I'll post 300 of these QR code. Let's see who actually clicks on these ones versus 20 volunteers going out having street canvassing conversations. Let's see who wins. Let's see who wins. We can actually sort of do that. And it also means that you don't take it so hard. You can kind of observe it a little bit like a scientist as well. But I think in training as well, there's a way that we should kind of run experiments and tests all the time. And because we learn from those moments and we can find some really cool stuff in that, I think.
But you also recently taught, in our organising fellowship, Nadia was talking to the campaign directors and managers coming through about data sets they can find, how would you find this information about who are the parents of kindy-age kids in your area? How, where do you find? And so I think that's also trying to teach the new leaders coming through about what data they can access, who they could ask. Is it asking someone in Eloise's job about how do you do this? How can I get access to that information? And sharing that insight a bit.
Yeah, totally. Because they're organising questions. So if you're campaigning on childcare, it's not just to mums who currently have kids. Who's about to have kids? Who's who are the people for whom are going to be carers? All right, we can literally find that out. We can literally find out how to have conversations with those folks and know where to find them. Then think, okay, where should we actually meet them? What materials are really helpful? Maybe those materials look like vaccination schedule reminders. Maybe it's for cheaper medicines, it's a prescription thing. There's so many different ways that we can sort of find out and hyper target, again, to that message sort of thing. They're organising questions, but when you count it and you count what matters, you can come up with some really cool local data things.
Nadia, with your training hat on, I want to talk about candidates now. Do you think that we prepare our candidates well enough, and how can we be better at supporting them in preparing them for this bizarre kind of thing, really think about it, when you stand for public office, right? You're out there.
Yeah.
What can we do in that respect to that and make it a bit more attractive for people to say, yeah, I actually want to give that a go?
I think there's a lot of work that's been done. The thing that I take away the most, I founded the first union candidate school that was for independent candidates and Labor candidates in Victoria. Victoria has so many council areas, and we were really looking at nationally held or liberal, very conservative regional areas, and thought, what if we just have this local champion with a strong local story? And I thought it would be the skills that we taught them that would make their actual first candidate experience genuine, they weren't just lying to me, genuinely enjoyable. It wasn't. It was that they were doing it kind of together as a collective. They did their calls together over Zoom on the phone. I reckon one of the things that's probably the most challenging about being a candidate is that it's kind of lonely and you're sort of doing it on your own, and then you also feel like everyone's working hard towards you and it feels like a lot. And I think we all know what it's like to kind of feel that way. But if you've got someone else who's like, well, my field director did this the other day, and you don't have to take it out on the field director, you can then like speak to another candidate and create like a collective space like that. So I think it's skills, I think it's knowing what to expect, how to grow sort of a kitchen cabinet to an actual movement that will get you there to win. But I think we always have to insert solidarity in all of our campaigns really and have that sort of collective base.
Kate, how do we build the pipeline for more candidates?
I don't know exactly yet, but I did try earlier this year. We did a one-day, have you ever wanted to be a candidate? We literally just emailed the entire party membership and we're like, do you want to be a candidate? Come to this training. And we had about 40 amazing people come, some 18-year-old folks who'd been refugees to experienced people who were in their 50s, who have lived a significant professional life and said, no, I might be ready now to stand. And so it was a really good, diverse group, and we had a good day. It was really fun. So I think we're certainly trying to put it out there very broadly, but also say to those people, the best chance you have of understanding how to stand for public office and how to be an effective local representative is to come and help some of your effective local representatives now too. So like come and work on a Labor campaign, come and be there and you know, do not with your candidate. Go and talk to people, do a phone bank with them and learn it, because it is overwhelming. And I think it's I have noticed in campaigns over the years that often the people who have previously been involved find that transition a little bit easier because it's less of a shock when they're like, oh, so I have to do these things? And you're like, yes. And so that's been really, really good. But we're very fortunate. We've got I think, a good pipeline up here. But at the same time, we're always looking for new people. And as Nadia said, I think it's great to broaden out to the trade union movement as well, to say, are there other people, your members, who have a great passion for this work and really want to get involved, and this is one way to do it.
And also, one pet hate I have is the drop-in candidate that we do. I don't know if you do it up here in Queensland, but in Victoria they were a little bit notorious of doing it, going through one particular Rolodex and saying, oh, let's get that person because they were on the board of the AFL or something, you know. I'm always like, surely we've got good people that can step up, that know their community, and can stand for public office and run, right?
Yeah, and I think depending on your local branch or your local area, you know, there are some electorates in Queensland where it's so hard to find a Labor person to run, Stephen, that I feel like no shade should be thrown at the poor Queensland Young Labor volunteers who end up being the candidate for Nanango.
They're patriots.
Or Condamine. I'm like, that is a badge of honour we should wear. Be like, I once ran for that seat. You're like, thank you. But then you're right. We should be looking at our local areas and bringing people through. But also, I think the thing that sometimes happens, certainly sitting in this job now, is you might think, oh, that person who's in that branch is obviously going to put the hand up when the time comes for that pre-selection, and then they don't. Mm-hmm. And then that everyone in that area is like, what? They're not running? Oh. So I think sometimes we need to be a bit more explicit about it even. And I think that's particularly important for women, and I think it's really important to be really explicit for our women candidates and say, no, we really want you to run.
Staying with that theme of diversity, I want to ask you, now I know that we've made a lot of headway and progress in terms of selection of women candidates. Obviously a long way to go still, but one area we are falling down is in our campaigners. You are one of two secretaries across our branches. And do we need to bring in quotas for campaign secretaries, public, party office, campaign leadership, that kind of stuff?
I think it's an active conversation in our branch at the moment for sure, and the Queensland Labor Women's Network has been working on that really well. We had a number of women who were campaign directors in the federal campaign, but I think, honestly, I don't think this was a job I would have put my hand up for unless someone had asked me. It wasn't an obvious pathway for me. So I do think it is about looking around and that solidarity in the movement and saying, no, you would be good at that. That's good. Come on in, like it's, and finding those ways we can mentor. And it was so great having Nadia come and do organising fellowship with us, and she's fantastic. But I was lucky, like 15 years ago, I did a program called Campaign Insight when, maybe it wasn't that long ago, maybe it was just very frightening. But when Anthony Chisholm was the State Secretary, and I was like, we need that back, because otherwise those folks coming through don't get that same experience.
Yeah. Eloise, you worked for Daniel Andrews and his private office. The majority of the leadership, senior staff, were women. I don't know if that's a rarity in other administrations across the country, but certainly it was something that I noticed, and I think that it really impacted in the type of government that Daniel leads. Just tell us a bit about that experience. How the hell did we get to a situation where we do champion women leadership in private staff?
I mean, I guess I would just broaden out the point, I suppose. I mean, I think that the leadership in the Premier's office is exceptional regardless of gender. Like, it is an operation and people are exceptionally talented there. And I do think that I don't want to essentialise gender, but I do think that certain behaviours in the office are reflective of the leadership. So quiet achievement is valued in a way that maybe it wouldn't be in a more male-dominated field. And I think maybe some of the behaviours that, I've only worked in that political office as a staffer, but I know that other people have said that, kind of the stereotypical cocky, I don't want to, again, make generalisations, but the cocky young male staffer is kind of doesn't fly there. No. But I think more broadly, I think that office and in government generally and in the party generally, we're doing a lot better on gender, but I still think we have a long way to go on other types of diversity. So whether that's ethnic background, cultural background, age, staffers are young, people don't have other life experiences. We're overrepresented by people that went to university and come from a certain class background. So I think we have a long way to go, because I think it is one of the great truisms of government that you get better results when you have more voices at the table. And that doesn't just mean go out and consult with that community. That means people who are shepherding that policy through government also have that lived experience, so they can say that doesn't work. And even from a purely comms perspective, you catch all these mistakes because someone will pipe up and say, that's not how we talk about that. Mm-hmm. You literally look out of touch and dumb if you are coming at it from this external perspective, trying to talk about an issue that is relevant to a certain demographic. And I think it's to the detriment of the party and the government if we don't address that.
Before we wrap up, I just want to give you guys just some final reflections. Leave us with some hope in terms of what the future of campaigning looks like for the party, and just sort of, I'm literally just making this question up on the spot, can you tell? But with you, Kate, first of all, what hope do you have for the direction that the party's heading in terms of campaigning?
I'm really excited. I think that organising fellowship training we just did with some of our fantastic younger campaigners, but also some experienced people, gave me a great amount of joy, to really see that next generation coming through, and I think there is a great future here.
Great. Nadia?
I think there's just so many people who are so talented and so able to communicate like our values, who we are, and how we're going to show that. And also there's a lot of other people who, if we are intentional about it, can join us and do even more. And I'm so excited to talk about that more and more.
Excellent. And Eloise?
Yeah, I just think you only need to look online and see what young people are talking about and what young people are making. I think that, those views and those worldviews and those opinions are on the ascendancy, and so I think, Labor, it can only go one way.
It's an exciting time. Before we wrap up, don't forget I'm doing another session tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. On sort of Community Organising 101, where we're going to look at a case study of a campaign that we ran last year. Some of the things that Nadia touched on in terms of public narrative, we're going to talk about that in that session tomorrow morning. So it's at 10 a.m. in one of these rooms along here. So hopefully you can all join us for that as well. To our three wonderful guests, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's wonderful to have a chat. Give them a round of applause. And to our fantastic audience, all 16,000 of you that came here for today's show, can you give yourselves a round of applause as well? Thanks for listening to Socially Democratic. Did you like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. And to get all the latest on Socially Democratic, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. And we'll see you next Friday. Socially Democratic was brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn Lawyers have spent more than a century paving the hard path to justice for everyday Australians. They've helped over 500,000 Australians turn their situation around, and they know how the system works. Their experience and skills means you'll get the best results possible. Find out more on their website, mauriceblackburn.com.au. Maurice Blackburn, experience you can count on. Socially Democratic was brought to you by SwiftFox. Every moment on a campaign matters. You need the tools that you can trust, lists that are up to date, phone banks that can change minds, emails that drive donations, events that will energise the community online and offline, and text blasts that distill your message perfectly. SwiftFox CRM is made for campaigners by campaigners. To find out more, go to swiftfoxcrm.com to win your next campaign.